Savage Minds. I'm your host, Julian Vigo. Today's guest is Abby Martin, the founder and host of The Empire Files, an investigative documentary series that became a main resource for people interested in understanding both the history and current actions of U.S. imperialism. In 2019, she released her debut feature film, Gaza Fights for Freedom, which has been called the definitive crash course on Palestine. Her new film, Earth's Greatest Enemy, about the environmental impact of the U.S. military, is on a director's tour now. Her uncompromising style has made her a standard-bearer of advocacy journalism and one of the most well-known alternative media figures in the country. I welcome Abby Martin to Savage Minds. Why is the U.S. military so often a blind spot in mainstream climate conversations and international agreements?
I think it's the same reason why the military is never questioned at all. It's so baked into American culture and our institutional, the institutional dominance of the U.S., both abroad and at home. Americans do not understand the consequences of having a global military empire. They don't even understand the fact that they do that they basically are represented, right, by this system. I mean, the media is so complicit in the status quo of having this bipartisan consensus for U.S. imperialism and domination around the world that upholds this unsustainable fossil fuel domination that they just it's background noise. It doesn't even really register with Americans, and all of the violence that's externalized by the system really never impacts people in the way that it really ought to, right? All of this stuff affects everyone and it's so interconnected, but the way that the media covers these things, it's so siloed that it's not presented in the way that it should be, which is every single day tied into every single issue.
Yeah, that's one thing I really enjoyed about your film is you see the parallel disassociation that Americans make all the time about our presence all over the planet, and they don't question often why. Why are we everywhere? Why do we have a gazillion air bases, even here in Italy? Italians question that, but you won't find Americans reading about that infamous incident where the plane clipped
Mhm.
the lift and people died. So there is a media blackout also on these concerns. So it's sort of like the snake eating its tail, where they don't actually see what's going on because they're not made to see what's going on.
Exactly, and the journalists in these institutions, they're true believers in the system, and so they are empire babies. They're good old-fashioned imperialists, Zionists. I mean, a lot of these journalists, they already are those people in order to ascend in these institutions anyway, and so the corporate media, not only is it subsidized by the very corporations that we should be holding to account, but it's comprised of people that are representatives of the ruling class, and that's who it's essentially speaking to. So it's so shocking, I think, to see something like Gaza take place and then just to see that same framework be applied to Lebanon, Iran. I mean, the same talking points that are so contrary to what we see with our own eyes, yet they're continuously parroted and unquestioningly by corporate media journalists. It's really unbelievable the disconnect between reality and the way that it's being perceived by the ruling class.
Mhm. In fact, we hear all the time, you just put on any channel, national security this, national security that. And I'm thinking, uh,
For who? And what does
y-
it mean,
exactly. What about national security for the Lebanese currently being carpet bombed and phosphorus bombed? Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And then, of course, these same people, these same outlets will be like, after the commercial break, we'll come back to an environmental expert on what you can do, right?
What you can do, how we can recycle better, you know? The more durable green compost bags that I mean, it's just unbelievable, and the amount of single-use plastic and styrofoam, the fact that, we're all held hostage in this system from the decisions by these big polluters, and it's fascinating not only, the parallels of just how inverted the propaganda is when it comes to like Zionism and imperialism, but just recycling and the onus being on just us as consumers to actually solve global pollution. I mean, can you imagine? It's unbelievable that we've been hoodwinked into this. That for the past 40, 50 years, it's like whenever mainstream environmentalism came into the discourse, it just immediately got co-opted by capitalism and sold back to us as if we are the solution as individuals, that we can make a fucking dent throwing our compost in a green bin while the US military is dumping 20 million pounds of toxic waste annually into the atmosphere. And that's just here in the US.
Indeed. We're told all the time about the biggest polluters. Airplanes, that's one of it's just airplanes, not which kind of airplanes, and cement. But how is it that this has been eclipsed so skillfully by our politicians? Those politicians, I mean, the Democrats who claim to be progressive, whatever that means. And then, of course, the larger body of politicians around the world. You know, I'm asking you this question, but it's like a big WTAF at this point because we're watching 2 genocides in progress right now. And how many people at the mic at the UN, the biggest power that the UN has had, has been able to walk out of Netanyahu last fall?
I mean, that standing ovation just a year ago in Congress, it was more standing ovations than even the minutes that he was speaking for. I mean, it was honestly just beyond eerie. How do you even describe with adjectives what we are witnessing? It really is, it feels unprecedented, just the lawlessness, the barbarism, and it's celebrated by our politicians and media figures. It's startling. But I think it's so hidden, right? It's so hidden and it's so obvious. That's what's so crazy about it. It's like when we started this movie 5 years ago, it did feel like this subject was just in the peripheries of academia, that statistic that we kind of, like, saw on headlines time and again, that the US military is a larger institutional polluter, the largest in the world, comparable to 150 countries. And it just seems so difficult to even wrap your mind around that because countries, emit because they have populations to maintain. Agricultural emissions, housing development, you mentioned concrete, this is one of the most energy intensive, carbon intensive materials. We've just witnessed miles long spaces be pulverized into powder, toxic powder from these bombing campaigns over the last couple of years. All of that is not going to be contained into Gaza. It's globally going to be felt for generations. The intentional targeting of all the oil infrastructure in Iran. Today is bridge day. Tomorrow's power plant day. And the media is just like, oh, will he do it? We'll find out in 48 hours. It's like, it's unbelievably dystopian, and
No, it's sick. No, it's sick because in a just world, all these people, it's almost upside down world. In fact, I've had to tell my kids recently, they ask me questions, they see what I work on. I had them watch your film. I had them watch another friend's film, Palestine 36. And I've tried to show them that the world is just like us.
Right.
and in a just world, all these media idiots would be maybe in a prison in some countries, but they would not be employed as journalists for sure. And it's insane because I really liked the way your movie began. I didn't realize that your partner was also in the military. So it's a very interesting perspective because I too was in the military. And when you have that experience, you're like, oh, well, I got out when France refused the US airspace over to go and bomb Libya back in the mid-'80s. And I'm like, I was just commissioned. I worked years to get a commission as a second lieutenant. And then I'm like, I'm not taking part of this. I got out. And that was my political awakening. But watching what we have done, just supporting the genocide in Gaza. And again, you were right. Palestine 36, first scene shows this beautiful train station. And Gaza was fully developed. All of Palestine was well developed and very agrarian at parts. And all of that will take decades to rebuild on top of new concrete mixers, new pollution making.
On top of toxic pollutants that are, I mean, the deep-seated rot of that once biodiverse, rich habitat. I mean, Gaza was in part a wetland. There was over 1 million olive trees planted there. It is a just wanton ecocidal
Yeah.
destruction. that accompanies all of these imperialist wars of aggression. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. And like you said, it's going to be rebuilt and in the coffers of the same people who've destroyed it. And you mentioned before oil and concrete. I mean, these are two big perpetrators, obviously, of global pollution, and they've been rightly pointed to as destructive industries that institutionalize this global pollution problem. However, what system is enforcing these companies and institutions to be dominant? What system is basically the enforcement mechanism for global capitalism that subjugates the rest of the planet, that necessitates the rest of the planet to bow to the dictates of global capitalism? It is US imperialism, and the military is the arm, the enforcement arm. So these companies have militaries, right? That military is the US military. So that's what we need to like zoom out. And it's not just about the military, it's about the system that the military represents and enforces at the barrel of a nuclear armed gun. And so that's the perspective that we need to understand. And what's really shocking to me is that the mainstream environmental discourse for decades has not talked about this, purposefully, intentionally obfuscating this situation, which is the elephant in the damn room. And if we don't address this, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? We're not counting emissions at these climate treaties or at these conferences. So if you're not counting the totality of emissions, we're not talking about
Right.
emissions. So all of it's really been a
Yeah.
farce.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the finger pointing at China. Meanwhile, China makes what, a third of the world's products? It's all a deflection of imperialism, in my view. But in what ways are climate justice and anti-imperialism naturally interlinked movements?
They are, because everything is interlinked. I mean, the fact that imperialism is destroying the planet. It's not just a death machine that um, degrades human life and the sanctity of human life. It's destroying everything it touches. These are toxic zones. If you look at the legacy of contamination in Iraq alone, this is generationally. I mean, at the height of the Iraq War, you had Iraqi officials saying, "Stop having kids," because of the widespread birth defects. What do we think that's doing to the environment? Every time a bullet explodes, the amount of carcinogens and toxic pollutants with every bullet. And there's a lowball estimate that 250,000 bullets were used for every person killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. What is that doing to the air, the water, the soil? All of that's being absorbed. Every time it rains, it snows in parts of Afghanistan. This is what people don't understand, because it's the invisible war that's wrought on the environment. And we're products of the environment. For some reason, capitalism succumbed us to the notion that we are superior. And it really harkens back to Manifest Destiny, actually. This was always a war on nature. The indigenous population was always seen as barbarians, as people who deserved to be dominated. And that's it was just always synonymous with the untamed wilderness that needed to be dominated. And that's exactly what we're doing today. It never changed, Julian.
The human cost of Iraq compared to Chernobyl, guess what? Iraq is
Mm,
worse. Yet all over the news this past week, what have we received? News about Chernobyl, because it's all about anti-Putin, right? The human cost of that war in Iraq is significantly higher than Chernobyl in terms of casualties. And the estimates for the 2003 invasion and the subsequent instability and occupation suggest that between 150,000 and 600,000 people died violent deaths. So, I mean, and this is not even counting what is going on now. And you talk about in your film, oh my gosh, it's devastating, from your work with the families at Camp Lejeune to the radiation that's been left all over Iraq, the dust these people
yeah.
are breathing in. It was estimated that for every casualty, this disgusted me when I read this, 230,000 bullets were fired just to make a balance. But these
Yeah.
are bullets that
Yeah.
leave remnants, right? So you traveled, in fact, to places like Alaska, Hawaii, Japan, and North Carolina. Which locations' environmental destruction left the deepest impact on you?
I think it's really important to first explain what layers of contamination we're talking about, because you mentioned Agent Orange, nuclear radiation, all this extractivism to build the arsenal and all of these new technologies that we've used over time with every era of militarization and war. That leaves completely scarred landscapes, apocalyptic moonscapes, obviously, when we're talking about the application of all the weaponry, but the invisible landscapes that have been polluted all across the US. Every base is a story of toxic dumping and a lack of remediation. The military dumps all of these chemicals, explodes all these ordinances, tests their new products around, like using not only service members, but obviously the local populations as lab rats, essentially, and then doesn't remediate it. They'll cover it up, they'll falsify documents, and then they basically will deny claims until the last person is dead. This is their MO. They do it over and over again. So, one of the scenes in the movie Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, this is one of the most devastating stories, even though it's one of the oldest. And it's one of the most excusable in a lot of people's eyes, because they look at it and they're like, oh, the military didn't know any better. They dumped toxic waste into these water wells in North Carolina for decades. And then, well, it was the olden days. It was like they did a lot of crazy stuff, before they knew better. But no, they knew better. They knew better, and they still did it. And they actually lied and let their own service members drink toxic, polluted water for years, and it killed over 1,000 babies. And can you imagine? There's a scene in the movie where these graves, you see this grave site called Baby Heaven, where you're seeing 3 graves of 3 stillborn babies from the same woman who probably thought it was her. That was her. That just her body just failed, and she ended up giving birth to 3 stillborn babies. And if she only knew that it was the military that had poisoned her, and that's why this was happening. And that's the thing that kills me the most, is that these people had no answers. They had no answers for decades. And still, one of
Yeah.
the protagonists in the film, Kim, in the scene of Camp Lejeune, there's this woman who's a victim herself. I mean, all of her family's been affected by the Camp Lejeune water contamination. And she was saying, I have to go around with this little card because the government has done nothing as an education campaign to tell people about what happened and how they could be helped, because they don't want to pay. They want to wait for these people to die. And that we're talking about a 50-year-old story here. So you just imagine, what are they doing? If this is what they've done here, what are they doing around the world with no environmental regulations, with no accountability mechanism at all? I mean, God only knows, Julian, the amount of dumping and toxic contamination that is being done with every single one of those 800 plus military bases. It's a disgrace.
You're listening to Savage Minds, and we hope you're enjoying the show. Please consider subscribing. We don't accept any money from corporate or commercial sponsors, and we depend upon listeners and readers just like you. Now, back to our show. Yes, not even bases, Abby. Quite recently, one of our writers, I found out, oh my God, has been affected by the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Oh my God.
Do you know about that?
I've heard about it. Tell
I
us.
was just shocked. But a huge chunk of Brooklyn should not even be habitated at all.
Oh my God.
And I just found this out like a couple months ago, and I've been like trying to do some research on this, and I'm like, and the more I read, Abby, I'm like, this is disgusting. People shouldn't be living there, because all of the ground has been contaminated, and we're talking with half the periodic table.
Oh
Okay.
my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is all about empire again. And so I contacted you, in fact, to come on because I've been following your work in Gaza. But it is, as you said, and I tell my students this all the time, everything's related. You don't get to say, I'm not political. If you drink water, you're political. So how did your investigation into Iraq reveal the long-term ecological consequences of modern warfare?
You know, doing the Iraq section was really important for us because Mike, of course, being initiated into the military when he was a 17-year-old child, essentially recruited. You look at these pictures of him, blonde, spiked hair, puka shell necklace. It's just like, this is a kid, who was basically recruited 2 months before 9/11. All of a sudden, 9/11 happens, and then he's all of a sudden invading Iraq. as like a 17-and-a-half-year-old child. It's just absolutely insane, or 18-year-old child. So of course it was really, really essential for us to revisit Iraq 20 years later and really take stock of what has happened there. Because it again, we're like goldfish in a bowl. There's this collective historical amnesia and memory loss, intentionally, again, obfuscated by our corporate media. So just like Libya, it's like, oh, there's this huge agitation campaign for consent to be manufactured for regime change, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, that's weird. The corporate media just moves on and doesn't talk about, what does Libya look like now? What does Iraq look like now?
Yeah.
What's going on there? All of these people, not one person in Iraq has been untouched by the contamination that's been wrought by US imperialism and the occupation that was there. We mentioned the bullets. I mean, every bullet, I mean, a lot of these bullets were laden with a depleted uranium just to pierce metal more efficiently. I mean, this is a
It's mental.
million-year
No.
toxic contaminant. This is a radioactive contaminant.
And we call
It
them
is
barbaric.
unbelievable. You know?
Yeah. No,
I mean, it's just like, you look in the eyes of these children that are being born today, knowing so many of them have congenital heart failure. So
no.
many of them are going to be left with diseases, with cancer. For what?
Yeah.
For what?
This is then begs the question, and it is ecocide, but is this a genocide through ecocide? I wonder. I have to tell you. I've been, since Iran, I've been telling my kids the West is now creating genocidal conditions against all Arab and Muslim countries, because that's really what's going on right now.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that's actually a really important way to look at it. We look at things really contained, obviously, because of just how horrifyingly barbaric they are viscerally to us in Gaza. I mean, I've never seen anything like that. But then, of course, the conditions that are laid around the world with the domination of the system, it is absolutely laying the conditions for genocide. Because when you're when you have an imperialist system that is ecocidal in nature, what does that do to the human populations? It's killing all of us. It's killing their children. That's what's so insane about it. It's collective suicide to them, to all of us, to every living, breathing thing on this planet. It's unbelievable what they are doing for short-term profit to their own kin.
You confronted several politicians and executives in the film. What was their most common excuse for avoiding accountability?
Of course, there's the zone of interest, the banality of evil, that notion where you can be really compartmentalized and separate and still kind of just go about your daily lives. But there is something also that I realized, which is the stupidity of evil. That people really are dumb. Like, the military is really comprised of a bunch of fucking morons who have literally never thought about these things. I mean, I am talking, there's of course plenty of people who operate willingly into this hive mind of, we have to get the minerals, we have to get the oil. I had plenty of generals and top military brass tell me, yes, like, we need the national security resources, aka oil, you dumbass. Like, one of the guys is just like, you fucking idiot. The world runs on oil, sis. Like, we have to keep all these other renewable energies at bay. And I'm like, okay, well, thank you for saying the quiet part out loud. But then you have other people who are like, I actually have no idea. Like, one of the guys on the Rimpak warship, I ask him, is it worth it? Like, is it worth killing all of these marine mammals? I mean, destroying so much life in the ocean just to train and practice for this fantasy. And he's just like, I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it. Like, I mean, you see their synapses like short circuiting at certain moments because they've been so compartmentalized into this notion of self-preservation that they literally have never even thought or been questioned about these things at all, which alarms me even more. But of course you have a lot of these people reverting back to the military speak, which is, it's very easy for them to just kick back into this rhetoric. But I had one of these guys who said, we're a rule of law organization, and that's why we were so great. He comes up to me afterward when my mic was off, sadly, and he was just like, my wife's an environmental lawyer, Abby. And he was like, and we do care about the environment. He was like, you know who doesn't care about the environment? Russia and China. And I was just like, but sir, Russia and China aren't doing this. Like, so your argument's kind of nullified. Like, there's no comparison, man.
No.
But it's just like, it's just so insane. And you've seen them have to adopt, of course, pre-Trump, during the Biden administration, which again points to why this movie is kind of important because it's such a time capsule in the incubation of the neoliberal status quo and how we got to a person like Trump. But before that, they had to adopt this veneer of environmentalism and environmental stewardship. And so you had this huge propaganda wave when the movie was made of them posing as environmental stewards and this and that. And then, of course, it all just got dropped when Trump gets in and they're like, oh, well. But it doesn't mean that they're not planning for climate change. Like they all are true believers in climate change. They are planning accordingly. And they actually obviously think that the military is the solution for climate change. But of course, they don't have to pretend. Just the virtue signaling is completely dropped.
I'm apoplectic about the Democrats, to be quite honest. It's almost like I get
Yeah.
the Republicans because they're doing what they always do, except we've got some Republicans that are anti-war, and I wish Marjorie Taylor Greene would have stayed in the fight a little longer because she was doing more than the damn Democrats. So it's just WTAF year for me. No, but I'm pissed off because I don't live in the States anymore. And I'm embarrassed constantly for what our country does. At the same time, I'm very aware that the idealization of Europe living here is false. Europe is complicit. And we can see how complicit they are, right? I mean, this is absolute madness. They can, at the helm, Macron in September talking at the UN, but words, no action. And I'm wondering, aside from obviously the complicity and cowardice of the politicians, you've spoken about the complicity and cowardice of mainstream media. How has the press helped normalize the military's environmental impact?
The press has, none of this happens in a vacuum. We know that the most grievous crime a state can commit, genocide, doesn't happen in a vacuum. I squarely blame the press for getting us into the state that we are in. The preservation of the status quo and the status quoism towed by liberal establishment press outlets like the New York Times. I mean, these so-called papers of record that a lot of well-intentioned Democrats and liberals who consider themselves educated, progressive, they will read these papers like the Bible, like the fucking Bible. It is in every coffee shop in Portland. I mean, you know this. I mean, it's so damaging and destructive because people look at it as the truth. They know that Fox News is propaganda. They even probably think that CNN and MSNBC, it's just mostly more entertainment coded than necessarily news like centered. But still, they'll watch these outlets unquestioningly. They'll read the New York Times unquestioningly. And what it does is it'll just there's no accountability with the crimes and who is perpetrating these crimes. And it's always just completely folded into the paradigm of US imperialism and that dogmatic notion that we are the ordained arbiter of the world. Like we are the world's policemen, and this is like our rightful duty. It's actually insanely perverse and sick and twisted, this chauvinism that's coded in all of these papers' positions. So when we're talking about the Middle East, it's just like, well, it's our ordained right. I mean, for example, even in USA Today, I just read an article the other day that was like, yep, Trump said he's going to take Cuba. Well, Cuba's going to fold instantaneously because they're like defenseless. So like, how is he going to do it? It was just like already accepted as an inevitability that Trump is going to quote unquote take fucking Cuba, that we have the right, instead of being like, I mean, screaming from the goddamn rooftops, the normalizing of this system, right? And then these papers have the audacity to even talk about environmentalism, right? When casually talking about war as if it is completely an acceptable thing, normalizing it, and saying that it's necessary. It's necessary. Publishing op-eds by Bret Stephens, by John Bolton. We need to bomb Iran. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's absolutely insane and sick. And what they have done, the lack of reporting on Israel and the systematic assassinations of their colleagues is just unparalleled cowardice.
I listen to news all over, and I was listening to Megyn Kelly, and she's been critical about this. She's like, she even said, what the fuck? Trump's plan is to execute everyone who won't negotiate his way. I don't think that's a good plan. So if you're having people on the right saying this, and as you well know, the under 30 generation of Republicans, they ain't liking this. Yeah, they're not happy with Israel. So there is some good news at the end of that tunnel. At the same time, the bigger picture's a problem still. And I was telling my children about how we create wars and then we send in advisors, then we send in aid agencies, relief agencies, and it's a circle. We destroy, then our construction crews come in and we make money all around. We're selling weapons, we're bombing the fuck out of people, murdering people, making them sick for generations, bringing in doctors and Médecins Sans Frontières, and then they come in and we're the heroes. We've saved them, but no one's mentioning we're saving them from the goddamn destruction we wrought
Exactly.
upon
I mean,
them.
exactly. I think you said it perfectly. I'm not going to think about this any other way other than a global genocide. It's an ecocidal. It is genocide globally. That's what this is. Under the boot of a military empire. Yeah.
And a capitalistic project to make money over and over. I mean, you make money on the destruction, make money on the goods coming in, on the reparations.
Yeah, and you mentioned your children. My 5-year-old child, his friend is Iranian, and so he hears obviously that we're talking about the Iran war all the time, and he's just like, "Why is Trump bombing Iran?" And I said, "Well, he's making money." And for the next week, he just kept talking about that. He was just like making money off, like he couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that you make money by killing people and engaging in warfare. And it really is, if you engage in it like a child, it really is incomprehensible just in the sheer morality of it, that we have like normalized a system that this is true, that this is
Yeah,
a constant truth. It's an
yeah,
undercurrent of just the way that we live.
yeah,
Fucking unbelievable.
yeah. I mean, at this point, I told a friend recently we should just let out all the mafia hit killers. Why not? They're
Yeah,
they're on the same par,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. I mean, these
We,
people are mass murderers.
yeah. I mean,
That's putting it lightly.
oh my God. Why do you believe it is so difficult for the public to reconcile the image of national defense and national security with the reality of both ecological destruction and empire?
It's too big, and a lot of people can't face reality because they can't deal with what's right in front of them. They can't deal with how bad it is and how bad it's getting. And so there's a lot of trauma responses, whether that's reverting into kind of groupthink, conspiratorial frameworks, religious frameworks. It's becoming a desperate situation. I thought that the more degraded our material reality would get and the more shocking things would unravel, people would be catalyzed into like an awakening, but and be more grounded in reality. But I think it's the opposite. I mean, less people now are talking about even climate change than they were 20 years ago. So there's something happening psychologically. It's like flattening our ability to respond and to really register what's going on and to act accordingly. And I think it's always been that way. Obviously, the propaganda wave after 9/11, that deep-seated fear, the activation of the reptile brain and the hatred of the other. Obviously, it's all compounded into these things, but there's something about the aftermath of October 7th and watching this genocide and having it be almost like a warning shot to the planet of like a threat almost, that this is what will happen. This is what's gonna happen to everyone, and we can't be paralyzed into that mindset. We have to take our agency back, because that's what they want us to do. They want us to be terrified, atomized, and basically feeling like giving up and that it's too late. But we have to flip that on its head and realize, no, it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. And the uncertainty of the moment and the terrifying nature of the uncertainty kind of makes it really beautiful, because something really amazing can happen out of the wreckage and ruins of all these institutions that have failed, the death and carnage. Because on one hand, it symbolizes how desperate the empire on its last leg. I mean, it is a waning project out of desperation, and that's why everything's so violent and extreme, and the propaganda is so fucking desperate and inverting reality in such a pathetic way, because they have nothing else. They have nothing else. And so it's an incredible moment. I'm so happy to be alive right now and to see what we can do with this planet to try to hopefully build something new off the ruins of hell that they've brought upon us.
Well, after 5 years of working on the film, what is the single most important action that you would like a viewer to take the moment the credits roll?
I think at the very least, especially as American citizens, the privilege and duty as an American is obviously paramount to use in every capacity, and that's with your voice. with your voice. We made this film because I do truly believe in the power of media. I'm an advocacy journalist. I use my voice and my privilege and my talent, to put out a very powerful message and to try to catalyze people into action from it. And that is what this movie is. It's a tool in the arsenal for education and movement building, and it's supposed to be an asset to help those causes. And so with the movie, I want people to not only exclaim these truths from the rooftops and try to reclaim the reality that's being obfuscated up from us, from the same maniacs that are profiting off the system. Use the movie to orient your friends and families, the people who are still reachable, people who are invested in the environment, people who are invested in the habitability of the future of this planet. Get this information to them. Support organizations around you. Join organizations around you, and start one if you're in the middle of fucking nowhere. Because all we have is each other, Julian. As you know, all we have is each other and the community that we have around us. But it's absolutely essential that we go into these spaces and into our lives with the perspective of anti-imperialism and understanding the answers of why this is happening, how this is happening, and what we can do about it.
You know what, Abby? Is I read that some people, after seeing your film, decided not to join the military. Was that an intended goal
Absolutely.
for you, or just a happy result?
100%. No, it's look, when we first made the film, I just wanted people to like it, because it was such a huge gargantuan task. And once it was out and I saw the impact and the power of the message, I realized, oh, this is so far beyond a movie. This is something that can change people's lives. People have become interested in marine biology after it. I've had countless active duty soldiers say, "I'm fucking done. I'm done." My cousin's daughter, who was about to join the Marines, is now not gonna join the Marines. The power of the message, because there's so little movies, even if they're anti-war in message, that don't glorify militarism and war. This is one that you watch, you'll never look at the institution the same again. You just simply won't. And so I encourage everyone who knows people in the military, show them the film. This is an opening salvo, 20 different entry points for anyone at any walk of life can come into this and understand what we're talking about. And that's the point of it. So let's do it.